Another Sunday. Welcome to Revved Up Reflections. It's just basically stories from motorcycles, not any brand in particular. But today we're going to talk about the illustrious Shovelhead. Got 3, 4, 5 stories on them, just regular stories. First one I'll do is I had a customer bring a bike in. I want to say it was a 77 or 78 lowrider. And standard top end rebuild. You know, the thing had 50, 60,000 miles on it. And shovelheads like to go through valve guides pretty much. So we went through and did the complete head upgrade with new guides, new valves, springs. Cut the spring pads for the lower valve collars. Milled the heads just to clean them up a little bit. Give them a nice flat surface. Bored and honed the cylinders and fit the later model Molly pistons, good pistons. And put the restrictors on the top end, basically build up a little more oil pressure. I think put a cam in it and replace the tappet rollers on the lifters and cam bearing and, whatever. Put in, dress the rocker arm tips, new rocker arm bushings, standard top end rebuild pretty much. Didn't do a no lead conversion to it, but didn't really need to. His valve seats looked almost, they weren't new, but they were, after cutting them, everything's well within spec as far as stem protrusion goes. So put this thing together, wrote it 3, 4, 5 times, broke it in for the guy, basically put several hundred miles on it, and gave it back to him. And guy calls me up one day and he's like, "Man, I think my motor's locked up." Okay, bring it in, let me take a look at it. So he brings it in and I'm talking to him about, how it locked up. And he's kind of hemming and hawing about what how it actually happened. Because I got questions, man. I need to know, what were you doing when it locked up? And I'm not saying it was his fault or anything, because it's locked up, it's locked up. It's something that I did, I'll fix it. But and I said that to the guy, if it's something I screwed up, I'll fix it. And he's like, "Well, no, I can't do that." So when he said, "I can't do that," it's the way he said it. So, inquisitive about what really happened. So he told me, I went out to my garage, which is on the side of his house, and it's cold outside, started the bike up in the garage, and goes, I went inside, smoked a couple of bowls, and turned the TV on and forgot about the bike running. He said, I fell asleep and woke up, and I was like, shit, I forgot something. He says, go outside there. The bike's been shut off for a while. He said, I put my hand on it, it's absolutely cold, And what he did is he let it run in there for several hours in an enclosed garage until it absolutely overheated, damn near melted the pistons. I mean, you could smell it. When a bike overheats that much, you can smell how the oil smells. You can smell that it's been extremely hot. Not just by the color of, the color of the damn pipes it got so hot it blistered the chrome off the pipes up around the heads. And pulled it all apart. And yep, guess what? Burned up everything. It got so hot it even locked the rods to the damn flywheel. So then it wasn't just top end rebuild. It needs rod set, or it turned the big end of the rods blue. They're not supposed to be blue. So it was a total rebuild of a rebuild, pretty much. And did it. And I told the guy, man, I can't you know, I cut him a deal. I cut him a little slack on the price, but yeah, it still had to pay. Okay, that was one. Second one was, and I got tons of these. I'm just doing like 4 or 5 of these. Uh, Another one was a guy, weird guy, and he played the biker part just a little too hard, and it just didn't have the personality for it really. So he brings the bike in, and it's 60. It was either a 66 or a 67 FLH. Wants it rebuilt, so went through and talked to the guys like about what upgrades he needs to make to it. Upgrade the oil pump, upgrade the oiling system. Rebalance the crank, fix the breather trap area to actually time it to it works, because the 66 through 69 shovels had that freaking egg shaped breather hole for the breather gear. Just not very efficient at all. So anyway, talked to him and we did all the stuff. Balance the crank, new rod set, new pistons, valve guides, valves, springs, mill the heads, the whole schmeal. Put the restrictors in the crank and paint, clean everything, paint the motor, paint the cases, paint the cylinders, paint the heads, polish the rocker boxes, polish the cam cover, everything. So it looked really good and ran really good. Well, I had everything out, resealed the transmission too. Pretty much going over the bike from front to back. Wheel bearings, spokes, brakes, checking everything out, fixing what needs to be fixed. And I have this thing I do when I do Shovelheads or Ironhead Sportsters, that I write in big letters on the work order. Customer must return in 500 miles to have the head bolts and the base nuts retorqued on every freaking work order that I do, top end on. It's in a suggestion. It's an absolute must, or there's no warranty whatsoever. I read that to the guy when he picked the bike up. You have to bring this bike back in 500 miles to let me retorque the heads and the base nuts. He just sits there and goes, "Yep, I understand." You really understand? I do. I'll bring it back in 500 miles. Then he's like, "Can I wait on it?" Yeah, no problem. You got a trailer, bring it on the trailer. Kind of forgot about it. Didn't see the guy for over a year. So one day, I'm back in the machine shop and I hear some guy come in and he's yelling and screaming and cussing and calling me a motherfucker and this and that and the other thing. And I come out because that motherfucker did this and that motherfucker did that. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So, yeah, he's a little guy, but he's fucking, Napoleon complex. He's fucking uppity. So, guys like, you fuck my bike up and I'll never come, well, get the fuck out of here then. So I go outside there, and there's oil everywhere. And I'm like, what happened to it? So he starts the thing up, and you can see the rear cylinder moving up and down. And the cylinder base nuts are gone. There's like one holding it on, and the other 3 are gone. And guys, I mean, he's pissed off. So I'm like, well, have you been checking the torque on the cylinder heads and base nuts? So him being the Shovelhead expert is like, well, you should never have to check them. You rebuilt it. Yeah, and it says right on the work order, you need to bring it back in 500 miles. I look at the odometer, and go and grab the work order, and it's got like 10,000 miles on it since he had work done on it. And I'm explaining to him, you're supposed to periodically check those base nuts and head gaskets as part of the regular service. And he wants to argue that there's no way that it says that. So I get a manual out and I'm going through what it says in the manual. And what do you know? There it says, you need to check these every so many miles. But he's, long story short, I kicked him out of the store and told him, don't fucking come back. So he goes and gets a fucking lawyer. Yeah, and he's going to sue us. So this whole thing, we go to court. He loses and has to pay court costs and all kinds of shit, and then has to find somewhere to have his bike fixed. So that's a done deal. Well, actually, I do have another one involving Shovelhead. We were going to 75 and 80 drag strip there in Maryland for a while. Probably 91, 92, somewhere in there. I think it was 91 when we were there. And this guy shows up on a Shovelhead Roadster. And, nice bike, good looking bike. It was the black and gold bike with the Roadster tank on it. Unloads it off the fucking trailer, starts it up, and, it sounded a little hefty, but nothing really great. Not that you really pay attention to it, just it was good sounding, good running Shovelhead. Running, skinny rear tire, and it's old style tire. I don't remember what series it was, but it was an older series of tire. It was a Dunlop. I want to say a K81 maybe. Wasn't a 181. I can tell that by the tread pattern, but maybe a K81, I think. So guy proceeds to go out, warms the bike up, he's obviously racing it. Goes out there, no burnout, none of that, just goes out there, stages. Kind of sort of cuts the light. He didn't red light, but reaction time was a little bit low. But proceeds to run like a damn 1190 on the Shovelhead. First run out. And he wasn't really, his shift points were off on it, so he wasn't really hip on it. The next run out, he did like an 1150, 1153, whatever it was, somewhere around that line. But kept getting better and kept getting better. Went over and talked to the guy. Interested. You don't see Shovelheads running that kind of times every day. So go over and talk to the guy. It's a 103-inch S&S, whatever, and somebody did the heads and somebody, whatever cam. I was like, man, you're getting a lot of wheel spin off that thing. What kind of tire pressure running in the back there? He's like, I got 32 in there. I was like, man, you better drop that down to probably about 15. Drop it down to 20 and try it, and then if that's still getting spent out of it, dropping down to like 15, then 10, whatever. Try it. And I got an air compressor here in the truck if you need to blow it back up a little bit. He's like, okay. But long story short, he started seeing him regularly there at Mason-Dixon, I think. And after a while, he had this thing running in the 10s. Because he was doing those numbers without a bar. And then change the tire out to a decent tire, which at the time was like a Yokohama, was a hookup tire. And put a wheelie bar on it. And then he was in the 10s. Good running damn bike. Good looking bike. Good running bike. Nice guy. Can't remember his name, but he was semi-local around Maryland somewhere. And I had one more, but I can't fucking remember it. Did the burn up one. Did the torque one. Drag race one. Now, I did one time where a guy comes in, and that was like 73, 74 maybe. Super glide, probably 74, I want to say. And guy had this idea that he wanted all yellow bike, yellow frame, powder coated yellow frame, yellow paint job. Wanted the cases polished, yellow cylinders, and for the cylinder heads, he wanted the heads yellow, but the fins on the edges polished. And I kept telling him, and did a close ratio 4-speed gearbox in it. The close ratio Andrews gearbox and the transmission, which beautiful shifting gearbox. All the right ratios for 4-speed. So I kept telling the guy, man, I don't know if all this yellow is going to look right. I'm like, what color yellow you're using? Because I've seen yellows before where it ends up looking like a taxi cab because they're using basically taxi marathon cab yellow is what it looked like. His was a little bit lighter yellow than that. And I got to admit, the powder coater got the yellow for the frame, or the painter got the yellow on the tanks and fenders to match the yellow on the frame. And I really didn't think it was going to work with all that yellow, but it actually looked pretty damn good. It added just enough black into it on various little pieces and parts to break up all that yellow and polish. And I used to have a kit, kind of a kit that I did on Shovelheads for a power-up kit, which basically pistons, high compression pistons, cam, and fix those god-awful intake ports, which are like, some of them are, floor of the port looks like this. So it's coming in and, basically this side of the port, floor of the port, this entire side of the port doesn't work. The only thing you're getting is on the other side, and the air that's coming in is kind of hitting the air that's on the back side of the bowl of the port, so they just don't work. But if you go in there, and I'm not even building them up there, I'm just putting a little radius around that floor of the port there, so it didn't like a damn almost cut your finger 90 degrees because it's so sharp there. Just rounding off the floor of the port, and not even dual plugging, just cam, fix the ports there. Good valves, new guides, good springs, getting rocker arm geometry just right, and usually Shovelheads I like running roller rocker arms like Baisley. Yeah, Baisley, Dan Baisley, I think used to make them. And he'd take stock rocker arms and weld tips on them so he could put on. He had some roller rocker tips that he put on there, and he'd weld them together, and they just work. And somebody told me he still does them. Who knew? But absolutely worked great. Used to buy a lot of them for Evo and shovel. Never broke one. And I've used them in some pretty damn high RPM, crazy lift stuff. And because it's stock rocker arm shaft or base, and then a welded on tip, you naturally assume that it's going to break where it's welded on. And I've run extremely high RPMs with extremely high spring pressures. Never broke one, never cracked one. Every one I've ever installed never failed. But that kit right there, which, it's basically cam and pistons and a little bit of port work and top end rebuild, you're talking probably about 80 horsepower with the rear wheel out of an 80-inch Evo or 80-inch shovel all day long. Some of them more, some of them slightly less, depending on what cam, how big a bike it is, what cam you're using. If it's a bagger, you're going to go for a more touring cam, so it's going to put out a little more torque and a little less horsepower. But light bike like a Super Glide, dead nuts on. Good ignition system, all that. But Shovelheads, love them. They're neat. They look good. They sound even better. And there's a lot of upgrades to them. mainly involve oiling and using later technology metals as far as guides and valves and putting restrictors in the top end, restrictors in the crank, lightening the crank on some of them, and rebalancing the crank, making sure everything's straight in the bottom end, and you're pretty good to go for a long time there. It's just basic old style Harley stuff. It's easy. I say it's easy, but a lot of people really do screw them up pretty bad. Oh yeah, I had a guy from this is one I was thinking of. This was prior to Memorial Day weekend, and they're having they always ride down to the wall there down in DC for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial thing. Big deal. A lot of people. I mean, a lot. Hundreds of thousands of people. So this guy's coming through on the Shovelhead he was from Chicago area, and he's out in the parking lot. He comes in, he's talking to somebody at the service department, service desk, and they refer him back to the machine shop. So I go out and look at the guy's bike. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? So I go out and I'm looking at the guy's bike, and there's oil dumping out of the rear pipe, a little bit out of the front one. I mean, it's like dripping out of the pipe. I was like, damn, that's screwed up, man. How many miles on this thing? He's like, I just had the top end rebuild that whoever does, I don't even want to say the name, but used to be a Harley dealer up there around Chicagoland area that did all kinds of top end rebuilds, like mail order stuff. They're in the back of the magazines all the time. I don't even know if they're still in business. But he had just had the top end rebuilt there. They put guides in it, they valves, pistons, everything. Did the rocker arms, all this shit. So he's like, man, I'm from Chicago and I'm on my way to DC. And I was like, well, I don't know, man. Like, can you take a look at it? I'm like, yeah, if you want me to. Took all the mechanics. I mean, we're busy, but had one guy kind of doing nothing. I'm like, man, put that bike on your lift and pull the heads off of it for me. So, guy's pretty sharp. I'll get him on there, get the heads off, bring them back to the machine shop. I'm whipping them apart, pulling the rocker boxes off, take the valve springs off, and go to pull the exhaust valve out. And when I move it, it doesn't want to come out. But I can see the guide moving up and down in the head every time I move the valve, meaning that it didn't just stick a valve. It's probably stuck a valve, but it'd been like that. It done wore the head out. So the valve guide's actually moving up and down in the head. Something's got to give. So pull the rest of them apart, check the intake valves. You can see the guide's been moving a little bit on the intake side. And pull the front head apart. Same thing. Guides are loose. And I always keep valve guides for Shovelheads, all the oversizes. But for that rear exhaust one, that was the worst one. I grabbed the biggest guide I had, and it just poof, fell right in there because it'd been running so long like that. And I told the guy, I'm like, man, your heads are pretty much screwed, but I might be able to fix it. Because I used to keep these monster guides, which are like, they're Shovelhead guides, but they're like, I want to say 25 thousandths oversized, which is it's pretty stout. And then what I do is chuck them up in the lathe and cut them down to whatever size I need. So I take this head and run a hone down through the hole so I can get an idea of how bad it is. Just to get an idea of the surface, out around the head is. I end up cutting cutting this valve guide down, replace all the other guides, hone them to size, because I'm not big on the reaming thing. I got a sawn and hone also. I like to hone the guides, it just does a better job. And get this rear guide cut down and measure it. And I got a good interference fit there. Pop it in there, hone it to size, clean the heads, take them, put them on the table for the SERDI. Cut all the valve seats in it, put it back together, and had them going within like 6 hours. So between tearing the bike apart, doing the machine work, putting it back together, and him getting on the road, about 6 hours. And guy goes to DC, didn't think nothing of it. Stopped by on the way out, and man, bike's running great. Brought me some fucking t-shirts and gewgaws and shit like that. I'm like, cool. You have a safe trip back to Chicagoland, man. So, pretty much forgot about it. And several months later, my boss calls me in his office. He's got a letter from somebody, some bigwig at fucking Harley, who had got a letter from this guy talking about, the great service we did for him. And he was in and out, even though it needed machine work and this, that, and the other thing. And the guy was some, normally customers, you don't ask them about what they do for a living, because you don't really give a shit. It's just some guy riding a bike, right? So he's some bigwig and fucking rich guy in fucking Chicago area who just happens to love shovelheads, and writes Harley this, and they get it, and they're basically giving you attaboy, for helping this guy out, because he's in some kind of manufacturing doing something or something. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but just that, he's some bigwig. So, fixed the guy's bike, and he went on to DC and went back to Chicagoland. Don't remember the guy's name, but ain't no big deal, man. And I think that's all I got. I actually have a lot more, but I don't write this stuff down. It just kind of pings in the back of my head. That's why I have such a hard time doing these story things, because all week long I'll be thinking of them, and instead of doing a little recording on my voicemail or memo to myself or whatever, I'll just forget about it. So that's what I had for today, which is just shovelheads. They're neat bikes. There's a lot of ins and outs to them, as far as stuff that works and stuff that doesn't work. Things you can block off, things you can restrict, things that were screwed up in certain years, like that stupid little breather tube they tried there from the tap block into the cases there, or into the cylinders back in 78, 79. 80, somewhere in there, shit that didn't work. That if you have that on your bike, take it off and block those holes off. It doesn't work. They know that. I got somebody that told me that directly from Harley. We fired that guy that came up with that idea. Just didn't work. He told me, if you ever see him, take them off there and put pipe plugs in there. And it's just a little tube that they thought would work, and it ran from the cylinders to the tappet blocks. Little 3/16 line supposed to equalize pressure between the crankcase and the gear case. Well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the breather valve, the time breather valve. You're bleeding pressure off into the gear case, and then you're wondering why you got oiling problems, blowing oil out the breather tube. Well, that's why. Anyway, that's really neither here nor there. That's just Shovelhead BS. That's all I got. Been cooling off here, and I'm not even going to go into that. So anyway, that's it for this Sunday. Hope everybody has a good week coming up.